everyone. Welcome to All Access Art Episode 2, Pricing Like a Pro. So do you want to sell a piece from your collection but have no idea how to price it? Today, we're going to talk about what tools are available and tips and tricks to help you find the right price point. And remember, if you have questions or a future show request, click the link below the video with the Google form in the comments and submit those questions and requests. Today, I have a really special co-host, my good buddy, Donnie. So Donnie is an art agent, writer, independent curator working in the imaginative realism genre. I know how to say that. It's just a lot of things all at once there. He represents more than 30 Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons artists, has written more than 400 art-related articles for various online and in-print publishers, and has guest curated 2 shows of Magic the Gathering artist proofs, as well as supported multiple other Magic the Gathering art exhibitions. And of course, Donnie is also a collector. So as a collector, he collects original card artwork and sketch cards and artist proofs for Magic the Gathering and Marvel trading cards. He began collecting original Magic art in 2017, now primarily focused on artifacts and artifact-related legends, and Marvel card artwork in 2020 with the release of the Marvel Masterpieces set by Dave Palumbo, and now owns original card artwork from at least 10 Marvel card art sets. That's a lot, Donnie, and welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
So this topic came up, and I've been chatting about it, obviously offline about it a little bit. It came up because, sometimes you just need to move a piece of art for whatever reason. And not everybody has the experience that some of us might have in doing that. So why not, provide some information to people and kind of help them out and figure out, where they want to go with things.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, even for us, you can speak to this. It's not easy. Even when you sell art every day, it's still sometimes a mental test to figure out how to get it where you want to get it and balance it for everyone. So no, I think it's great, and hopefully people get a lot from this. Yeah,
I'll tell you. Yeah, as a professional, pricing art is one of my least favorite things to do. I mean, I do it; it's a huge part of my job, but
sure, yeah.
It's not my favorite. So these are things we're talking about that we actually do. And we do them as professionals, but also as collectors. And so I thought that Donnie, having you on, you'd be perfect because you have, you're both of those things, right? We have our foot in each of those worlds. And you collect some different things than I do as well. So really looking forward to what type of insight you have for people today.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So one of the things you'll hear when people talk about pricing artwork is, what are the comps? People ask, what are the comps? So I thought the first place to start would be, well, what is a comp? So comp, is short for like comparable, right? So what is out there that's comparable? You'll hear comps in the real estate world and in any sort of market where you're looking at comparing things to other things that have sold before to help you to come up with the price. So, in the antiques world, there's this. It's all over the place. So it's comps are a real thing in a lot of places. When you're looking at artwork, the best comps are pieces that have the most in common with the art that you're looking to sell and have sold the most recently. And we'll talk about why in those things as we're moving forward. But some of the things that you can look for in comps are who's the artist, what book, what series, what card set, what Magic the Gathering set, fill in the blank there, right? Whatever thing it's included in. Character or characters, or some characters are more popular than others. Things that are special about the page. Is it a key storyline? Is it the page where so-and-so was born or died or, something happened? Is it a first appearance page? One thing that a lot of people don't bring up is controversy. So if there's something controversial happening there that can affect pricing, and is it timely for current events? So looking at movie releases or other things, right, that can become more popular. And you can also take other more nuanced things into account. like era, style. Those aren't nearly as direct. But if you think about the main things, right? Artist, series, character, and if there's anything special going on, that's a good place to start with your searches. Am I missing anything there, Donnie?
No, I mean that makes a lot of sense. It's obviously I'm coming from a card perspective, but it's, you know, when you're looking at comparables for things that there's only one of, realistically, you have to really kind of get in the weeds and start to draw some connections on, you know, on the whiteboard to figure out how these different things line up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's the meme, right? Where you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you don't have to do all of the things, right? So a comp can be a comp, but it's about how close or how far, like how important is that, you know, given the situation.
Right. Exactly.
Because you can really, really get into the weeds, you know, if you want to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's look at it from from a Magic perspective, like, you know, you start with the card. Has the card been reprinted? What was the set was it in? What were the cards that it was printed with? You know, and then it starts to level. And you have to draw the line somewhere. But even just having that thought exercise will result in a more accurate price and a better chance of selling a piece, or if you're on the other side of the foot, a better chance of buying the piece when you're doing your buying research.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And those things walk right hand in hand. So.
Absolutely. And that's a really good thing to point out, because even if you never sell a piece of art out of your collection ever, even if you're just buying, this is really good information to have, because when you're getting ready for that auction or when that piece comes out of the woodwork and is available, you need to know what price point works for you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So now that we know what comps are, where can we find them? To me, I think the place I always go first for comps is through Comic Art Fans, and then there's a market you can as one of the subscriptions that you can pay for, and it's like insanely cheap. Is the market data, and so that's the first place I go when I'm looking at trying to find comps, because it pulls information from auction houses like Heritage. It pulls some eBay information. It has sales from any reps that are connected with CAF, which is a lot of them. I'm
Sure.
included in there. So it does have a lot of art reps in there as well. You can look at things like price trends and averages. Obviously, this is just a tool, right? So you have to use your knowledge and being able to pull those pieces apart. But there's individual data, aggregated data, and I really, really like that as a starting place. And then from there, I can see how much information do I have? How much more do I need to look at? Hey, everyone, it's Future Tatiana. I wanted to show everyone what the CAF market data looks like, and where you can find all the information and what you can get from using market data. So I'm in my gallery right now on CAF. This top menu here is always the same regardless of what page you're on. So if I go back to the home page or whatever, it's still here. So you're going to go to resources. I'm going to show you a couple of things in particular here, but I definitely recommend people get it and check out all of these categories. The first one I want to show is the auction market data search. So it shows right here, thank you for being a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, that won't be there. And then I recommend that you click to request to get that subscription. It's a really great tool to have. It's like around $75 a year. And it's worth so much more than that, because you can get so much out of this. And it's really, really helpful tool. I've had it for years as a collector and also as a professional, but even if I wasn't doing this professionally and was just a fan, I would still highly recommend it. It's worth its weight in gold. So the auction market data is mostly going to pull information from Heritage and eBay. And you can do a simple search, or you can also, you'll see expanded here. You can do tight searches. I recommend starting with a more general search. I usually just start with my keyword, and then if I find I need to narrow things down, I will. So you can go in here with, you can look at some of the things I've looked at recently. So let's look at Adam Hughes. So I can just put an artist name in there. And at the top, it does have total searches and some sale totals and average price. I don't usually look at that because all the information that's going to be in here is stuff that was listed on eBay, even if it didn't sell. So you'll see these have zeros. That means that they didn't get bids on them. So it's information that I look at, but I don't, necessarily, I don't count it as a comp, right? Because it's not a sold item, but it is good to look at. The heritage ones, they have this check mark next to them. That's a sold item. You can see what it sold for on the right. These are all clickable links. You can click it. It'll take you to that page on heritage where you can look at more details. And then also one of the things that happens here is that it's based on how the seller categorizes things. So on eBay, if somebody sells, for example, a book like they have here, it's going to come up here because they had it listed in the art category. So just something to, you want to go through and look for things that are applicable comps for the item or items that you're looking to sell. The next thing I want to show you all that's really cool is it's just the next tab down, which is the dealer market data search. So Comic Art Fans has a very large number of comic art and other art dealers that are part of this database. So if I look up Adam Hughes again, and it goes again, it's got that information on top that you can, it's good information to have. It shows it by most recent sale, and these are items that are have been up with these dealers that are now marked as sold. So you have the sold date and then the asking price. And the reason that says asking price is that's what they had it listed for on the site when they marked it as sold. So usually that means that was the sold price, but it's not like a hammer price like with Heritage where that was exactly the price. So that's why it says asking price. So there can be some variance there, but it's really, really good information because you can see how frequently things are selling, what types of things are selling, the prices they're selling for, and then who's selling it. So on the right side, you'll see the logo for the dealer and the names also here in the information. So you'll see a wide variety of different dealers selling. There's me, a little Kitty Pryde sketch I sold for someone a couple of years ago. So this is really, really good information. And this is unique to CAF. You're not going to find this dealer sold section with accurate information anywhere else. This is worth way more than its weight in gold. So those are the two areas that I use all the time. I highly recommend you come in and check out all these other. It's cool to see what other people have on their want lists and all sorts of other stuff as well. But definitely start there for when you're looking at pricing art, are the auction market and the dealer market searches, and you will be so happy that you've added that to your list of things to check out. It's going to make pricing so much easier. And then, of course, you can also use just the CAF regularly just to see what other pieces are available based on your search, right? So if I'm searching by an artist, what's available right now? And that is broken down by collectors who have stuff for available versus dealers who have stuff available. And then you can look at a little bit of history just through that basic search as well, which for me, is incredibly helpful.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So I mentioned Heritage and eBay in there a little bit. Do you want to talk about those a little more in depth?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Heritage, especially recently, has been relevant to the way I buy as a collector and the way I would sell as a collector. Not that I would necessarily consign something to Heritage, but it's looking at it from, there's been more and more and more, especially trading card art, which is what I'm interested in, that sells through there. So there are starting to be more and more data points from Masterpieces sets and other Marvel sets. They sell Magic from time to time, and they've gotten what appear to be essentially estate collections of Magic artwork. So it starts to become the only place that painting or early piece is ever sold. So it starts to set a baseline But Heritage is good for that, and it's all accessible for free, which is really nice. Once you sign up, you can look at every past sale that they've had, and it goes back at least 15 years from what I've seen, and probably further than that. So that's pretty nice. eBay is very similar in that way. There's a little bit less art on eBay from at least what I've seen in the things that I'm looking at. But I've bought and sold artwork on there. It opens it up to an audience. You would think that you're looking at a dedicated group on CAP or on a Facebook group or something like that. But sometimes there's people that just aren't on those places, but they are still on eBay from when they signed up 20 years ago, and that's what they use. So it's worth using. I mean, I think I mentioned this to you before, but what used to be called Terapeak is now called Product Research, is a really handy tool in seeing what something sold for on Best Offer, which is what lots of folks use. Just because everything's negotiable, and you can see if it got paid for, which is also important, just to make sure that there's no funny business.
Yeah, people buying their friends' stuff just to
pump it up. Like, look, oh man, 4 or 5 of these pages sold for this. Oh, wait a minute, they never got paid for. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Those orders got canceled. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good information because there is a lot behind just this item is sold on eBay, right? There's so much more behind that.
Right. I mean, even for something, a place as big as Heritage, it's like you have to look at, and we'll talk about this later, but you have to look at when it was sold, what kind of sale it was sold in, because if they drop a Marvel Masterpieces painting in a sale and that's the only piece of trading card art, there's a very good chance that it's not going to do as well as a set, an auction that's dedicated to card art, and that's going to affect its value and that's going to affect its comp. It just is if you try to use it later. So you have to think about all of the things surrounding not just the piece, but all of the things surrounding the piece too, if you're going to try to use it to, figure out a value for what you want to sell something for or what you want to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, something can sell for a certain price, but that doesn't mean that price was the market value, right? So market value is when essentially all other things are equal, right? People have the opportunity and they see the piece. It's that value. I have certainly it's been many years, but in my collecting career, I've certainly snagged a couple pieces on eBay that were just put up with a, buy it now price that was way less than it was worth because the seller just didn't know.
Sure.
That doesn't mean because I got the piece for half price that's the market value. I just got lucky.
Right. You're right. And lots of times, if we buy something like that, it's like, oh, well, we got a deal, but you were the only person that saw it. And, on the flip side of that, if something sells for X and then you go to sell it again, maybe you were the only person that wanted to pay X. I think we've probably both been in that position before. Like, I really wanted this and I paid this for it. And turns out it was me and the other person still doesn't want it as much as I did.
Yeah.
So it's like that can create some interesting, comparables, especially as time goes on.
Yeah. And, I'm going to be doing shows in the future that talk about art appraisal and things, but there's a huge overlap, right, with what we're talking about. I mean, essentially, when you're looking at market value, that would usually be an appraisal value.
Right.
The more data points you have, the better. So if you only have, that's why sometimes it's good to go for comps that are not as direct. So if you have one comp of, let's just say you're trying to sell. I'm trying to think of a good example. We were talking about Bianchi, right? Mm-hmm. Bianchi Marvel card art before. Let's just say you're trying to sell one, and this is not true. If you go look for it, you will find a good amount of data. But like, let's say I looked it up and I only found one piece, and that's my only comp. Then what I would want to do is start looking at maybe other Bianchi art. Let me look at things that are not Marvel card art. And then let me also look at Marvel card art that's not Bianchi.
Sure. Right.
And then you can use that to kind of get in there, get into the, figuring that out. So it's, some stuff's easy. Some books, all the pages have been out there and they've sold multiple times, and you can find 3 or 4 pages from the same run by the same artist.
Sure.
And sometimes there's nothing.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, some Magic card art is like that too. You know, you can kind of gauge it by, a common card by this artist. This is the baseline. The range is, within, $500 each way, and that's pretty close. You know what I mean? So if you hit it in the middle, or you hit it a little high with best offer, or you want to move it fast and you put it at the bottom end, it's probably going to work. Obviously those situations aren't, there's not a ton of them, but they do exist.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that you had mentioned that I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it was Facebook groups for comps.
Yeah, for sure.
So talk about that.
Especially in Marvel card art world. There's a lot of very active Facebook groups. There's one for masterpieces only. There's one for the rest of the Marvel card sets, and there's a couple other offshoots from there. And art does pop up in there and sell. Not so much comic art because it has to be related to trading card, but there's been Marvel masterpieces paintings sold in there, other set releases. Especially when you get down into like sketch cards and artist proofs and things, that stuff is plentiful. So it's much harder to search, and it can also, it's not permanent. So the person that, if I post a painting for sale and I sell it, I can delete it and it can just go away. And then, that comp is kind of lost. But for the most part, the things are there. And if you pay attention, I think I mentioned to you before, I tracked most of the Masterpieces 2020 because it was my first set in when Dave sold it. And then as pieces popped up on the secondary market, I would just, go in and update my spreadsheet. So I could kind of keep track where everything was, what it sold for. And that way, if I ever wanted to sell mine, which I won't ever, but if I ever wanted to buy something, I had the ammunition on both sides. So it, just so that I had my finger on the market at all, the entire time.
For those of you wondering, and I know I've mentioned this not on this show, but another cast before, that there is a group for Magic the Gathering art on Facebook. There's actually two now. And that is the main place that Magic the Gathering art is sold. And I'll be talking more about it at the Magic panel at Comic Art Live next weekend. So make sure you check out the panel, and we'll talk more about that, because it's social media is a very kind of weird. It's so much commerce happens there with artwork, but it's real weird to pin down.
Sure. And think about the Magic Art group that you mentioned. That is the place for comps. Like, you can use Heritage, but you won't get anywhere near enough data to understand what a piece might be worth. Whether you've been doing it for a long time or not, you have to use that group. That is the place to do it. It is the comparable if you're selling Magic artwork.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, that, like you said, there's the card art groups. There are comic art groups. Sure. There's fantasy art groups. There's video game art. There's everything. I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff we don't know about too. But it's like you said, Facebook's really hard to search. You can put in a very specific term, and you're looking for a specific. I remember this auction a while back, and it's just not there.
And nope, you can type in the card name or the artist name, dead to rights, and it will give you not that back, even though it's there, like you've seen it. Yeah. But yeah, it's a little cumbersome that way.
It'll give you some completely different. And then forget the other platforms, social platforms, which are just like there is
very challenging to use, and things happen there. You know what I mean? This stuff is sold on Twitter or X or Instagram, and especially Instagram is essentially impossible to search by text, especially if something was sold in a story or a reel. Like, you will never find it again.
Yeah. So that leads me to the thing you mentioned a minute ago, which was spreadsheets.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's how I like to do it for things that I'm interested in, that I may, things that I collect that I may sell in the future, things that I want to buy. I keep my own, spreadsheets. They're not crazy. I mean, they're detailed, and I don't do it for everything, only for the stuff that I really am interested in. Like I said, Marvel Masterpieces 2020. And I have a Magic spreadsheet too. There are some people that track every Magic artwork sale that happens in the MTG art market. So you never have to worry about going back to search. I don't do that, but I would encourage folks on both sides, whether you're a collector that only buys and never sells, or you're somebody that does some wheeling and dealing, to keep your own records as best you can for things that you feel are important. And generally you're going to come back to them. It might not be in a month or a year, but it will be helpful to have in the future.
Yeah, I definitely have a spreadsheet I track. Sometimes I get behind, so I'll like take a screenshot or,
Sure,
stuff
yeah.
to not forget for later. The number one thing I track is, Michael Turner artwork, because that's
Right.
He's probably
That's your jam.
the artist that I'm the most known for, really having a finger on the pulse of that market.
Sure.
Although we'll be talking about the pulse of the market in a minute, and how putting your finger on that right now has been really hard.
Right.
But yeah, you track, and it's a spreadsheet thing. And I know some people you can track what works for you. If you want to just track screenshots, there's nothing wrong with tracking screenshots if that's,
right, yeah.
how you want to keep your information.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, it's spreadsheets with multiple tabs and it's color coded, and then there's a link to the image, and then there's, I keep information in mind with the artist or artists, the name of the piece, if there's information on what size it was, what artboard it was in, medium, where it was sold, when, how much it was sold for, all of that kind of stuff. And then I always try to have an image to go with it too,
Sure.
because I can't just remember what one was that?
Sure. Right.
What's that one again? Yeah. So that's what I do. But it's, as a collector or as a seller, it's whatever works for you. But there are definitely plenty of places that art sells, including some auction houses and things where you can't go back later. Once the auction's over, that's it.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the thing is, sometimes it is worth just, sending it, into Dr. Google and seeing what comes back. Because especially now, as obviously comic art's been around for quite some time, but in the rest of the fantasy genre, as it starts to spread out and people start to move older collections of things, it's popping up in stranger places. It doesn't all go to Heritage. It doesn't all get sold on Facebook. I've bought pieces at very strange offshoot auctions that just happened to get this person's collection, and it had some things in it. So you just, you can send it into Google and see what comes back, and, you might be surprised what you find.
Yeah. I mean, that's always part of my, I have the list of things to do. I check for comps and whatever. And it's like, well, you might as well Google it, 'cause you never know.
Yeah. Just give it a send and see what happens.
Yeah. It never hurts. Right. But don't expect that if you go down 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of the rabbit hole that it's going to get better.
Yeah,
when you just Google it.
No. Yeah. Page one. And if it's not there, then drop back to what you know.
Yeah. And usually, you're going to get the first couple hits are going to be CAF. And if that person has a website or a rep or something, it's going to go directly to that anyway.
Yep.
So,
yep.
So yeah, spreadsheets, track your stuff, know your stuff. What if I see this all the time. Speaking of Facebook, like Facebook Marketplace, or, when you're just looking for like random other things, not necessarily art, but random other things. And people go, well, it's worth this much because look at this listing on eBay. Here's this listing on eBay and it says $5,000. So that's how much I want for mine too.
Yeah. My thing is that if it's still for sale, and it sounds so goofy when you say it out loud, but if it's still for sale, then it hasn't sold. You know what I mean? If it's for sale at X, then somebody hasn't bought it. It doesn't mean it's not worth that much, but it does mean it's not worth that much right now until somebody puts their hand up. And there's lots of stuff that I've looked at as a collector and have let sat, and I eventually paid the money for that thing, and now it's a comp. But it wasn't until somebody said I'm in. So I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You can put something, especially, using eBay as an example, because that's a completely like person-to-person driven market, right? Anybody can start an eBay account. I mean, I'm sure there's rules, but I've had eBay since 2001, so I don't remember.
Right.
But, it's really easy to start an account. You don't have to be a professional. Anyone can do it. And you can put stuff up there. And I could put a matchstick up there and be like, $1 million. eBay's not going to stop me.
Nope.
They don't care. You can put whatever price you want. That doesn't mean it's worth that much.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, there are art pieces I can tell you right now that just get relisted over and over and over and over and over again. And it's fine for them to put them up for that price. People can do what they want, but that is not a comp.
No. Nope. I haven't run into it as much on the art side, but on the trading card side, it is definitely a hurdle, especially when, in Marvel cards, there are, several people that open a fair amount of cards and they put it up for X, and they will leave it there forever until somebody says yes, or eBay, explodes into the sun. And there's no budging, but it does make for a difficult conversation because that happens. Well, this is, especially when things like, one of one cards or sketches or plates, well, this plate that's a one of one in a different color is up for X. I would like X for mine. Like, well, no, you have to have the whole, spiel. Like, this person posts all of their stuff. None of it ever sells. Check the completed listings under their seller account. It's always red, on and on and on. But it does create a problem, but those are not comps. That does not count.
So yeah, we just needed to clarify that because that's something we've run into as buyers and sellers and
sure.
Yeah, and everything in between, right? And also, this probably doesn't need to be said, but just because you wish something is worth a certain amount of money doesn't mean it is.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think one of the other things I'm like looking at notes, guys. I wanted to make sure we talked about everything and that we didn't miss anything. So I have notes so that we get all of the things into your brains.
Me too. They're right down there when you see me look that way.
Yeah. I just have, like this desk space is like impossibly small. So one of the other things that is important to look at, if you're looking, so this is from the selling piece, right? If you're selling a piece of art and you're pricing it, is asking yourself why you're selling it. Why am I selling this piece? Because where you price it matters based on why you're selling it, right? If it's, I need to sell this piece of art because I need to pay my rent, that's a lot different than I want to sell this piece of art because I would like to have more money to buy other art.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you do comps, and often when you do comps, you're going to end up with a range because you're not going to have these are all one of one items, right? So you're not going to have a really solid number. You're going to have a range. So if you are really hurting and you need the money now, you're looking lower end of the range. I mean, this is what I do for my own stuff. If I'm selling stuff and I need money, or I'm working with one of my artists or one of my clients, and I go, well, okay, if you really need the money, here's kind of where I'm looking at. Here's market. Right. Here's, I want to move this, right? People say price to sell.
Yeah. Do you want to make sure it sells? Here's a number.
Yeah. And one of the other categories I see, and I want to get your thoughts on this, because there's the two categories I talked about. I really need money. I would like to sell this to kind of what we call trade up or, get into something else or whatever. And then there's I'm going to price this to the moon and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts about that? What happens like when you see people doing stuff like that?
I mean, I guess the biggest part, as a collector or as somebody that sells artwork, is it's very hard, especially when you see it happen over and over again, kind of like what I was talking about, with some of the things that you see on eBay. It's hard to take that person seriously because there's pricing at the high end of a market, and then there's pricing at the stratosphere, and it's like that person either A, doesn't care, B, doesn't know what they're doing, or C, it's a little bit of both, which is the most dangerous combination, of all of it. Just because it makes everything that much more difficult. Not even if you don't want the things that they're selling, it muddies the market for everyone and makes it more difficult. And that's true of the other side too. If they're, and this doesn't happen very often, but if there's a seller or an art rep that, fire sales everything, that's very similar too, because then that takes value away from the work, from the artist, and from all the work that collectors and dealers put into it, because it's work on both sides. Like, it's for somebody to acquire a piece of artwork is not, that is an act of emotional and mental labor too, on the buying side. Then you can't overlook that. So, the extremes are both kind of dangerous places to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a difference between pushing the envelope
Sure.
and being ridiculous.
Sure. Yeah.
So pushing the envelope is a totally different thing. I think that's sometimes you want to see what the market can bear. You want to see how popular something is. Maybe it's done really well. Oh, X movie came out and people really liked it. And, this first appearance of blah, blah, blah sold for this amount of money. So let me see how much I can get for mine. And, that one sold for 20,000. So I'm going to put 25,000 on mine. That is a perfectly reasonable example of pushing the market.
I have no problem with that, especially if you have the only piece that's like that, because you're beyond the one of one. Then it is a one of one, but you are also you have the market monopoly at that point.
Yeah, there's nothing else.
Right, you're allowed to
it.
do that. That's okay.
Yeah. But if you are I think the example that you gave with how it messes with the market, or people kind of not taking you seriously or not wanting to shop with you, would be, in that same example, if somebody sells a piece for 20K, let's just say, it sold in an auction, or, so it's a public, we know it sold for 20K, and you have something that's comparable, just straight comparable, and you decide to put it up for sale for 60K.
Sure.
That's the level like we're talking about. People are just going to go, oh, well, this person's not serious.
No, it gets written off. It doesn't matter in any field. When you're looking at an average, that just gets removed from the set. You know what I mean? It's as if it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, as a seller, I take a lot of consignments. In addition with the artists I work with, I take consignments from clients. And I have to have that hard discussion with people, because I have people who, this is a lesson I learned over the years. And I learned this lesson from having things that people wanted me to shoot for the moon. And so I did, and it didn't have the outcome that I expected. And so now I understand, how this works. And so I'm fine, pushing the envelope, pushing the market. But if somebody says, I want to sell this piece and I think it's worth 50 grand, and I go and I do all the comps and I'm like, look, it's worth 25. Then we have a discussion.
Right.
If you want me to push it, I'll push it to 30. Right. But I'm not listing it for 50. I don't.
No, it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of the collector's time, because there's, a 0.01% chance that a sale will result from that. And that's not to say that it's not somebody's, nostalgia grail and they'll pay whatever, but there's, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And there's also what we call, like a piece can get burned, right? We use the word burned for it. So if let's say I took that consignment and I put the piece up for 50 grand, nobody buys it because they're all talking about it behind the scenes, but they're talking about how ridiculous the price is. Nobody buys it. Okay. 3 months later, my client goes, oh, you were right. Well, geez, now I need the money. Can you go ahead and drop it to 25? That's market value. I can drop it, but the chance of it selling now is significantly lower because the piece has already been burned. People have already seen it.
Right.
They've already emotionally and like mentally turned away from it.
Yeah, they've detached from it completely.
Yeah, it's a totally psychological thing, but it's real.
You know this on the magic side, with the volume of paintings and product that come out and how fast you have to be to the market as those things come out. You have to get the price, and this is, with my agent hat on, you have to get the price right the first time, because you don't really get a second chance. Sometimes you do, but if you go out guns blazing and it doesn't work, you're out of time almost immediately, and that piece is burned, at least for a little while, maybe not forever, and maybe the artist is okay with it. There's been cases where like, get X or I'll keep it. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. As long as that's understood, but it's that just speaks to the importance of getting it right the first time.
Yeah. Which is, part of why I hate pricing, because there's a lot of pressure.
Sure.
But, it's a lot of things to juggle and to try to figure out. And I think that segues, directly into one of the other things that I know you wanted to talk about, which is looking at where the market is and timing and ebb and flow and stuff too.
Sure. Yeah. And I think especially now in 2025, as we see the art market not necessarily receding, but it's much more challenging than it was. It's even more important now to look at your comps in the time in which they were sold. So like artwork that was sold, at the end of 2020, 2021, and 2022 you could sell that same painting again today, and chances are it will not repeat what it was. So when using those pieces as comps for, things from similar sets or similar artists, it's that much more challenging because those are most likely inflated numbers. Whether we want to realize it or not, they just are. It's true of that in Magic. It's true of that with Marvel trading card artwork. And that's, it's not everything. And there are things that will sell for more now than they would have back then, just because there's different players in the market and different people looking for different things. But as a whole, it's very important in 2025 as somebody selling artwork to pay attention to when your comp sold. Just because it's a very different time now.
And it makes it hard because normally when you're looking at comps and you look at, let's say you bought a piece of art 5 years ago and now you want to sell it. Normally you could look at, a certain percent small increase every year.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, right. It
goes up.
Of course it does.
However much. But since 2020, the market has done crazy things that none of us have ever seen before because we haven't been through a pandemic and all of these other things and all of the other stuff that's come out of that. Right. And we didn't know, during the pandemic, it wasn't just about money, it was about collectibles. And people were putting a record amount of money into collectibles, Pokemon cards and Magic and comic books, and there was this huge explosion.
Right. We saw decades of single digit appreciation happen, in months. So, where something would go up a couple percent each year, all of a sudden it went up, 3 figures in 18 months. And now that, it's snapped back to reality. It just, for the most part across all things, it has come back. The very good stuff is still always going to be very good, but most of the stuff in the middle or that is available doesn't fall into that category.
Yeah. So if you go and you look at those comps for the last few years, the market's been going down really since late 2022. And 2021 was like the crazy, the stonks, right? Like you could just, that was the time to just sell whatever you had and things were insane money. And Magic art was just a really, really perfect example because prices went nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you started to see things go down a little bit and then you started to see them drop. So in 22, 23, we saw things go down a little bit and then we had this significant and notable drop, right? The last year and a half or so.
Right. Yeah. And it's not, it's not all at once and it's not across the board, but it's something as, whether you're a casual seller or you're a dealer, you have to be aware of it just because it affects things and it has been a small rolling snowball, back kind of the other way.
Yeah. And it's even in the last month or so, it's become amplified. People are afraid to spend money on things that they don't absolutely need. Sure. And, art's an investment too. And so they're, kind of afraid to go down that route, especially because people know that the market is what we call soft right now. Right.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
really important to take in mind. You can't say, well, this sold in 2021 for this much, so now I want 25% more. You just can't do that right now.
You can't even say I want the same amount in most cases, just because, again, and Magic art is a good example. If you were to take, the prices realized on pieces and lay them out in a column, you can see exactly where it went like this and then where it started to slowly taper off like that. It was very noticeable for the people that are entrenched in that market, on both sides, buying and selling.
Mm-hmm. And, just like anything else, there's exceptions.
Always. Yeah.
But, the exceptions have footnotes. So Michael Turner art has not gone down. Sure. It continues to go up. It's going up more slowly the last couple of years than it had. in my head, if it was, X amount of price in 2021, it's like, I would think it, 22, 23, 24, 25, like in my head, how much it would go up. Things are still going up, but not in as big of increments as they had been. But Michael Turner passed away in 2008. So we have nothing new since then. And the artwork that he's most known for was done in a time period that's hitting peak nostalgia right now.
Sure. Right.
So right.
Yeah.
So like modern art used to just be super cheap. But now everybody who, it's like the hobby aged in, right? So
yeah,
it's like essentially like if people ask like, what does that mean? Well, once collectors are making enough money, have more disposable income. So either they stopped having more kids, or their kids are older, or, any of that kind of stuff. They're feeling stable in their lives and can spend more money on hobby things that they like. And so that's when you start to see an increase. So if you think about, that's usually mid 30s. I mean, look, everybody starts collecting. I started collecting when I was 18, but I mean, I wasn't buying, like paintings, and I was getting sketches and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it's that level of once enough people in that category have reached an age where they have huge nostalgia, then that's why we're seeing huge price increases in like 90s stuff right now.
Right. And a part of that was what happened with Magic. When I started in 2017, the art market was 2,500 people, and it's almost 30,000 now. But a large part of that increase was from, shortly after I joined, like 2019 and up through. So you had people aging into the market, right, as there was this big influx of cash and a spotlight kind of on the industry. And it was a perfect storm to watch a market explode. And that, it happened with Marvel cards too. I mean, just a little bit later, it was really shortly after Dave's set came out. And it just hit the gas, and, the original artwork for the cards went right along with it.
It's a little off topic, but share a little story about how things went with Dave's Marvel masterpieces, like how that whole thing was as a collector, because I was in that too. Yeah, but it was crazy. So
yeah, we were teamworking it. So when Marvel Masterpieces 2020 was announced, it was July. I think it was July of 2020, and the set officially came out in October. So it's in COVID, and the way Dave sold the paintings was every week at a certain time on Sunday morning. I think it was Sunday morning or Sunday, like noontime. A group of paintings would go up, and it was a race to purchase them. And I mean a race like hit the buy button, get through PayPal checkout. Myself, Tatiana, and another collector named Sydney, we worked together. If somebody wanted something, everybody just went for that piece, and then we would figure it out. And I think we had it down to like 4 seconds between like buy, PayPal's logged in, it goes right to the checkout, everything's just good to go. And it worked really well, but it was a crazy time, and every week more people got in, and every week things went a little bit faster. And mind you, the first group of paintings that they put up were up for a long time. I mean, they were up for months and did not sell, but by the end of it, every piece sold, within several minutes for the most part.
Once it caught on, it became the biggest FOMO. It was absolute insanity. I mean, and because you didn't know which 10 pieces were going to drop. So we all had our list. Like, these are the ones I want. And so we would all, when I say all of us, it was Donnie, Sid, and I, and you guys will get to meet Sydney at the Magic panel at Comic Art Live next weekend. So watch that, and you can meet the Sid we're talking about.
Yep.
We all had each other's list, and just to triple our chances of getting something. And we missed so many things. Oh man, it was crazy. And the piece I got, I didn't even get. I don't remember. I think Sid's the one who got it.
Sid got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was literally half a second faster than me, but I mean, that's what you had to do. It was absolute insanity. So that's when we're talking like peak market stuff and how things have been crazy before, and keeping that in mind when you're looking at prices. Like, that's kind of an example of just how crazy stuff was.
It is. And that was at a time when, when the painting prices didn't necessarily reflect the demand. So that was all that, all the crazier, because like I mentioned, Dave's first couple of batches were up for a long time, at very, by today's standards, collector friendly prices. And even by then they were collector friendly, but, by the time it was there, and then now, now things from Masterpieces sets generally aren't even available. It's a much different thing. That's my cat bouncing off the screen.
Of course. Right.
But
yeah,
so it was a wild time to be alive.
Yeah. And then now, now we're in a market where, you can, I mean, you and I both know as sellers, even just, direct sales with artists, we can put stuff up, follow the same things that we would do before. And, we kind of have an expectation of how many things will sell and how fast things will sell.
Sure. And
it's just not happening like we're used to. And so things are just really, it's the unpredictability of it is the hardest. And so when you're pricing things in that type of market, you still want to do comps. That's super important.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need to sell something, if you're motivated to sell it, you just need to go for the lower end. Like, you really have to.
That's just it. You have to really take into account your motivation of, do I need to sell this? Do I want to sell this? Or, do I not care if it sells, while still being reasonable about, things like your reputation as a seller, if it's something you do regularly, or even if it's not, because there are CAF pages that I visit all the time because there's interesting things. And if I would want to buy something, they're reasonable. And then there's some that I don't even bother to look at because, it doesn't really matter. It's nice to look at, but you'll never buy anything there.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, if you bought something in the last 5 years and you're looking to sell it, there's a good chance you're going to lose money on it. Yeah, which is not something that is a typical. Normally, if you sit on something for 5 years, you're going to make at least a little bit of money on it. Sure. But right now, anything you bought in the last 5 years, there's a good chance you're losing money.
No, yeah, you can't necessarily be expecting that year over year appreciation that we mentioned. It's just the chances of that happening are few and far between. It's not zero, but it's definitely less than it used to be.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a completely different world right now, but comps are your friend. They also give you a little bit more to lean in. So if somebody says, oh, well, I see you have this up for this amount of money and I'd like to give you this amount of money, sure, that how much you're willing to wiggle. And you can always share comps with, a buyer. Somebody says they want to buy something from you. You can see, look, these are the comps. And then there can be a good discourse there. Sometimes they might come back with, well, here are these other comps and these are my thoughts why. And then, you can decide if you want to make that sale or not.
Sure. And I think this is probably a good spot. But there's a golden rule that was told to me by a man named Patrick Wilshire, who runs ILXCon, the IX Imaginative Realism Convention in Reading. And he told me this in 2019. It was a completely different conversation, but I never forgot it. And it's that you can always sell something, but you may never be able to buy it again. Now that's advice from sitting in here as a collector's seat. But if you think about it on the flip side as a seller, when you're determining what you might want to sell or whether it makes sense to sell it now, think about that, because if it's something that you would want to buy again, maybe it's not the right time to sell it unless you absolutely have to. I never thought about it from the seller's perspective, but it's really true that way. You don't want to have regrets when you go to sell something, and sometimes you will. There's pieces that I've sold that I miss. I'm glad that I did what I did when I did it, because it was to buy or trade into other artwork that I really wanted. But you still, you don't forget about those as it goes along. But I'm ultimately happy I made that decision. But you don't want to sell something for even a price you're happy with. If a year down the road you're like, man, I really miss that on my wall. It's obviously, if you need to, that's a very different thing, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely I bought a Turner piece a couple of years ago from a collector who was asking, the price was definitely fair, fair market price. And it was a nice piece and fit a category I had been looking for. And I talked with them, and it was, I'm selling this because of, medical bills, like one of those kind of things. Right.
Sure.
And so I said, look, I'm not planning on ever selling it, but if I decide to sell it down the line, I'll hit, let you know first.
Absolutely,
so kind of giving him like right of first refusal if I ever decide to sell it.
Yep.
And I think a lot of collectors have those kind of stories of like, this piece,
Sure.
if I ever sell it, I have to offer it to this person first, or those types of things.
Absolutely, and a lot of that relationship building is important, for both collectors and sellers, of having people that buy a certain thing or collect a certain thing, or you can trade with, or just knowing where something is. There's a piece from Masterpieces that I bought, and I knew where it was, and it was fine. I didn't need to have it, but it popped up, and the person hit me up and said, "Hey, do you want this?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I appreciate that," and I bought it. And that was nice to have that sort of consideration. And there's a lot of reciprocity that can come from that for both parties, and it makes things a heck of a lot easier when you're selling something if you have a community of people that might be interested, because all of a sudden you're not as stressed out about trying to find that right price point. Where it's going. That person's excited about it. It takes all of the jitters and the BS out of that equation. It's a nice thing to have.
I think that's such a good thing to bring up, and it really like harkens back to episode 1 of the show, where we were talking about, what do you wish you had known, and giving advice. And the biggest thing that kept coming up in the conversations was community.
Sure.
It might seem like the world that we're in is large, but compared to other collector worlds, it's really tiny. And we know so many people, and I mean, the card collecting world's like really like everybody knows everybody. But even the comic art collecting world, it feels big, but we, like, a lot of us know most people in it. I mean, it's not nearly as big as a lot of other collecting worlds. And that's one of those fuzzy things that you can't put a number on. But remember that when you're selling stuff, that a lot of it is about the community and paying it forward. And if you are known to be easy to work with, and you help people out, and they're going to be more willing to help you out as well. That doesn't mean that you can't just be like, if you just want to sell and not have to deal with any of that kind of stuff, that's totally fine.
Right.
But that is something to keep in mind, that the community piece of collecting is huge. And if you choose to not participate in that community, you will, you potentially can lose out on a lot of that benefit. I mean, just an example, a couple of weeks ago, I was bidding on stuff in a heritage auction, and there was a piece that I knew that Matt DiTullio would want, right? Matt, one of the mats with calf. And I texted him, and I'm like, he's like, I haven't, I'm not sure. I haven't looked in the auction, and I'm just going to buy it. You just pay me back. I'm just going to buy it, and I knew I wasn't going to go over a certain price and blah, 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 right? I was being reasonable about it. And I got it for a great price, and it got here, and I mailed it off to him. That's all relationship stuff, right? If I know you like something, but I don't like you too much as a collector, because why would I ever want to do you a favor, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be looking at things that you might want in an auction.
Right.
At a show or whatever, right?
Exactly. And we talked about the Masterpieces 2020 chase. It took 3 people working together to try to cover the bases for one set. I mean, even this painting right there, that one, I tried to buy that from the person that had it. It wasn't for sale, and then it was for sale for a large number. And then it just popped up on Facebook, and Sydney, who we were talking about, called me on the phone and said, "Hey, that piece is up, and it's less than it was before." But otherwise, I missed it, and it does take a collecting village when it comes to those sort of things. Plus, it's nice to do stuff like that with other people. It's good to have people and be able to sit down and have these conversations in places like OAX. Just a plug for that show is that's the best part of the whole thing, is to sit at the auction or roam the halls and have these sort of conversations. candidly and with other people that care about the same things that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other benefit of sitting at the auction is you get to see me the whole time because I'm on stage. Yeah, it's, since you were talking earlier about all these places we're looking to find comps are also places that you look to find art, and art can be in weird places. So having that community of people who know, this person collects this thing, this person likes this thing, they're looking for X, Y, and Z. So they'll text you from a convention, hey, this artist is here and they have this thing. Do you want me to get it for you?
Yep.
It's just really nice. And, it's not saying like, hey, because this other person's in the community that you need to give them things for free or you need to give, it's just about the, being fair and being mindful and all of those things. And it does really go a long way in so many circumstances.
Yeah. It just does. And it doesn't mean you have to sell stuff to people at cost or, people aren't allowed to make money on different artwork, but it's just a different experience when you as a seller, become part of a community. And that's whether you do it professionally or casually or, once every 5 years, it doesn't matter. And it goes back to that reputation part. If you're the person that prices things to the moon and is a known entity for not working with other people, then other people are probably not going to work with you. And conversely, if you're the person that is looking out and helping out and making things happen, that usually gets paid back tenfold. Mm-hmm. So.
And when people know that you're trustworthy and that you price things fairly, they're more likely to just take your word for it and take it at face value.
Sure.
Which can be really helpful in situations where it's art that's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
That they don't go, hold on, let me get back to you. Let me go do 2 days worth of comp checking myself. They know that you're going to have a fair price.
Right. You get it close and, you save everybody a whole lot of, headache and time and aggravation.
Yeah. And then also if people know that you do your work and you do your comps, they know that you already did the work. And so they're not going to go, let me go spend a whole bunch of time doing it myself. I'm just going to find the same comps you found.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So the last thing we wanted to talk about today was, you've found the art that you want to sell. You decided I'm going to sell this piece. You've done the comps, how much you want to sell it for. And so the last thing is where should you sell your art? And, for me, and not counting websites and stuff, right? A little different when you're a professional, But like as a collector, as a collector, first place for me, is CAF, right? Comic Art Fans. And CAF has, 2 virtual conventions a year. One of those good things that came out of COVID, right? So now we have online conventions that you can attend from anywhere in the world twice a year. And that's a great place to sell, because it's event based, you're going to get eyeballs, right? I mean, you can post stuff on CAF anytime, but when you do it for Comic Art Live, it's, that there's going to be a concentration of people there looking at it. So those are kind of my, like my main go-tos when I'm going to be putting stuff up. What about other places like Facebook? Like what would you recommend for like social media selling?
That's generally my go-to, and I really don't use Facebook as I might have used it 10 years ago. I am essentially still on Facebook for the group and for Messenger, and that is primarily where I sell most of my artwork, both professionally and, as just a collector. And I've sold plenty of things or traded plenty of things there. And a lot of it goes back to that community piece, is that it's there's always eyeballs, there's always people looking, but there's also a lot of connections I've made, over the last, however long it's been, 5 or 8 years, I guess, of people that I know care about these things. And, for me especially, it's not necessarily about getting every dollar, but if you can put that thing in a place that is very, exciting to the person that has it, then that's worth a little bit of something too. At least for me, it really is. I love nothing more than when I sell a piece at auction for one of my artists, or even something out of my own collection. Somebody sends a picture of it, 3 weeks later, it went straight to the framer, and now it's hanging by their bed or by their desk, or it's just a nice thing. But yeah, I like Facebook. I've never really sold art on eBay. It's not to say you can't. You definitely can. And I've also never consigned anything to Heritage, but I think that is starting to grow considerably more. So that's not saying that I wouldn't do that in the future, just because it's a different audience, and that's okay.
So personally, I mentioned earlier, I've been on eBay since 2001. So I do use eBay. I mostly use it to sell extra magic cards. Because I'm one of those crazy people who buys a box. I love cracker packs. I know it's the worst, but the thing is that I know what I'm doing. I know I'm cracking packs because I like cracking packs.
Right.
I don't crack packs to look for cards, because if there's a card you want, go buy that card. This is the advice that you will hear from everybody ever.
Yep.
You don't crack packs to look for specific cards.
No, you're doing it for some entertainment value.
Yeah, it's just fun. I used to actually, back in the day, for a while, I was like just live streaming on my personal Facebook whenever I'd get, and I just have the camera set up.
Yeah.
And I would just share all the, live, cracking all the packs. Maybe we'll do that on the show sometime. And I want to start doing some
that'd be fun.
Set reviews with art and stuff. That'd be fun. But yeah, so because I crack packs, most of the, a lot of the cards I'll have doubles of or whatever. And so I sell the extras on eBay, but because I have that already there, and I have been on eBay for a long time, I do post, a few pieces from each of my artists on eBay, just as like if somebody's looking for art from one of my artists and they don't know they have a rep, they don't know where to find it. If they search them on eBay, they'll find it, and then they'll find me. Right. And then I put some consignments and stuff, like different things up on eBay, and, the conversion's a lot lower, but it can be a nice way. I mean, I do have regular clients now that I got through eBay, because there are people, like you mentioned earlier, that they just aren't really steeped in the art world, and so they don't know, and so they still buy on eBay. And so I have regular clients now that's where I first found out about them. Things you need to take into consideration when you're selling on eBay are seller fees and all that other stuff, right? There's a whole slew of things that come with it. I want to say with art, it's like approximately 15%.
Yeah.
But those are just things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And then, you mentioned Heritage. So like the last thing was I just have it categorized as have someone else sell it for you. So that would be, any auction house that's not eBay. So, Heritage, Comic Link, Comic Connect, Hakes. There's a ton of different ones. If I left you out, it doesn't mean that I don't think you're awesome. Those were the first ones that came to mind. Those are the ones that come to OAX, so they came to mind.
Right.
And the type of art you're selling, if you're not sure, like if you want to go to an auction house and you're not sure, talk with each of them individually. This is what I have, and this is what I'm looking to sell, because they each provide different experiences. They might specialize in different things. They do different types of promotion. They take different fees. So, some of the auction houses provide a quote unquote higher level experience, right? They might have more reach, and they put more into some of their platform stuff, but then their fees are higher. So it just depends on what it is that you're selling and what you need to get out of it. Some of them will give you some money in advance, towards whatever it is you're selling. So those conversations are free to have. So you just go on there, any those websites, and you can talk to those people.
Right.
Of course, that is an auction. So then there's always risk. So, that's just the thing with auctions overall, is just, there's always that risk, right? When you start something at $1 or whatever. And then you can also go through, I mentioned I take consignments and stuff sometimes for clients. And then there are dealers who will take other consignments, or they'll just, buy. If you have several pieces, they'll just buy or trade with you. Some like Mike Berkey or Anthony, right? Everybody who watches this channel knows who they are. And so if you're looking, to move stuff, they could be good to talk to as well, to get trade value or to get cash for things. And so a lot of it depends on that, going back to the why am I selling this? And so if you are in the need the money boat, that can affect which of these where to sell things makes the most sense to you. So there is no right or wrong answer. These are all places to sell art. They are all valid. They are all they all have pluses and they all have minuses.
Sure.
And but you just have to ask yourself, do I want to be the one responsible? Do I want to have to ship it? Do I want to have to deal with customer service, or do I want to risk auctions or anything? There's a lot of things to ask yourself about it, but you just choose what works for you at the end of the day. And even if you sell something in an auction, doing comps is still important, because when you have a conversation, when you're getting ready to consign a piece, those things do come up. And it's good for you to know what you have, right? It's just always better, in a conversation for you to know you have the power of knowing the value of the thing that you hold, versus just, going into things blindly. And it just gives good, so you feel more informed on things when you're having the conversation, when you're trying to set stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power really across this whole thing. And that's not so that, you're smarter than the other person, but it's just so that, that it just provides a better experience, for the person that's buying it from you too. It just is. If you're knowledgeable about what you have, what the market looks like, and even the piece itself and the world of art around it in which it exists, it's a better experience for everybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Donnie, I think we've given people a couple of things to think about.
I think
maybe
so
a
too,
lot of
yeah.
things to think about. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we leave people to their comp hunting?
No, I think that's it. Remember that golden rule of you can always sell it, but you might not ever be able to buy it again. That's very important when you're thinking about, what you want to sell, and then, do your homework, and don't be afraid to reach out to people that might know or specialize in something. Tatiana just mentioned, herself and myself, we, those conversations are generally always free. I'm always happy to talk about something. And I know she is too, whether it's a question or, hey, what do you think about this? Or does this even make sense to sell? And we're going to tell you, it's like, yeah, no, absolutely. Or no, you're not going to get that. And if you like it, it looks really good on your wall, and that's okay too. And that's, sometimes that's better than going down a different rabbit hole of pricing for something for too much and then having the feel bads.
And, in also letting people know that even as professionals, I reach out to you because there's stuff you know about better than I do. I reach out to you. You've reached out to me.
Yeah, we talk all the time.
Yeah. And so it's never a bad thing to ask, right? And sometimes people can go, well, I don't have an exact number for you, but why don't you ask this other person, or why don't you, search this other place you didn't think of? So yeah, absolutely. Dig into that community and talk to other people and get thoughts.
Yep, it is the best resource out there, is the other people that are doing and are interested in the same things you are. That is your best comp.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for being my co-host today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
thanks for having me.
getting this info out. And
this
and thank
great.
you all for watching. And we'll see you soon.